The Guardian's Call. The crystalline spires of Europa Station cast prismatic shadows across Dr. Elena Novak's laboratory as she studied the latest readings from the outer system sensors. Something was different about today's data stream. The usual electromagnetic patterns from Jupiter's radiation belts were interrupted by an unusual signature, one she'd never seen before. Dr. Novak, the station's AI chimed, its voice carrying an unusual note of urgency. Unknown vessel on rapid approach. Biosignatures matched theoretical profiles of the Carvi. Elena's heart skipped a beat. The Carvi, crystalline apex predators who had evolved in the high-pressure depths of methane oceans. In 15 years of deep space exploration, humanity had only caught glimpses of their ships, geometric works of living crystal that defied conventional physics. "Show me," she commanded, and a holographic display materialized before her. The vessel was beautiful, a dodecahedron of translucent crystal that pulsed with internal light. But its regular geometry was marred by a sprawling fracture along one face, and its trajectory was too steep, too fast. "They're going to crash," Elena realized. "Alert Medical Bay 1 and get me Commander Patel." The next few minutes were chaos as the station mobilized for emergency response. Elena rushed to suit up in her reinforced xenobiology gear, designed specifically for handling dangerous predatory species. The Carvi were known to have natural weapons capable of shearing through starship hull plating. Their crystalline claws and teeth evolved to hunt leviathans in the methane seas of their homeworld. The impact, when it came, was surprisingly gentle. The Carvi vessel's crystal structure absorbed most of the force, shattering into thousands of glittering shards that scattered across Europa's icy surface. Elena led the first response team across the treacherous terrain, their boots crunching through the mixture of Europa and Carvi crystal. "Life signs?" she asked through her suit's comm. "Two signatures," replied Dr. Raj Kumar, their xenobiologist specialist. "One strong, one very weak. They're in what appears to be the central chamber." They found the entrance, a hexagonal portal that dilated open at their approach. Inside, Elena's helmet lights revealed a scene that stopped her in her tracks. A massive Carvi warrior lay sprawled across a crystalline dais, their body a latticework of living crystal that shifted between deep violet and midnight black. But what caught Elena's attention wasn't their imposing size or the wickedly sharp crystal growths that served as natural weapons, it was the tiny form they held protectively against their chest. "I'm detecting severe structural damage to the adult's crystal matrix," Raj reported quietly. "The younger one appears physically intact but is showing signs of extreme stress." Elena approached slowly, her hands raised in what she hoped would be recognized as a peaceful gesture. The adult Carvi's faceted eyes tracked her movement, refracting light in complex patterns that their xenolinguists had theorized served as a form of communication. "I am Dr. Elena Novak," she said clearly, knowing their ship's universal translators would be working to convert her words into the crystalline resonances the Carvi used to communicate. "We're here to help." The Carvi's response came as a series of musical chimes that the translator rendered in a deep, resonant voice: "Protect. The seedling. Matrix, failing. I am Guardian Kithral, last of my clutch." Elena's scanners confirmed what the Guardian was telling them: their crystal matrix was critically damaged, equivalent to severe internal injuries in organic life forms. The younger Carvi, the seedling, was physically unharmed but their matrix was vibrating in patterns consistent with extreme distress. "Guardian Kithral," Elena said, maintaining eye contact with those faceted orbs, "your seedling is safe, but they're responding to your distress. Let me help you both." For several tense heartbeats, the Guardian remained still. Then, with a sound like wind through crystal caves, they extended their arms, offering the seedling to Elena. The entire response team held their breath. Never in recorded history had a Carvi willingly handed over a seedling to another species. Elena cradled the young one with infinite care, supporting their delicate crystal structure. The tiny being chimed softly, their matrix shifting from stressed ultraviolet to a calmer blue wavelength. The Guardian's posture relaxed fractionally, crystal facets dimming. "Raj, prepare Containment Bay 3, Elena ordered, never taking her eyes off the seedling. "We'll need to maintain proper pressure and temperature for both patients. And get me everything we have on crystalline matrix repair." Over the next 12 hours, Elena worked tirelessly to save the Guardian's life while keeping the seedling stable. She spoke constantly to both patients, explaining every procedure, every adjustment to their environmental controls. The seedling remained surprisingly calm in her presence, occasionally reaching out with tiny crystal appendages to touch her faceplate. When Guardian Kithral finally regained consciousness, they found their seedling resting peacefully in a modified pressure chamber beside their recovery pod, Elena keeping vigilant watch over both. "You did not separate us," the Guardian observed, their translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics in their voice. "Of course not," Elena replied. "Carvi seedlings need constant resonance contact with their guardians. Separation would have caused unnecessary matrix strain to you both." The Guardian was silent for a long moment, their facets shifting through complex patterns. "I am called Kithral-en," they finally said, adding a harmonic that the translator marked as a deeply personal identifier. "My seedling is named Vextul. You have earned the right to know our true resonances." Elena recognized the magnitude of this gift. Among the Carvi, personal resonances were shared only with those considered part of their crystal collective. "Thank you for trusting me with your care," she replied formally, "and for allowing me to help Vextul." "Trust," Kithral-en chimed thoughtfully, their matrix producing harmonics of deep consideration. "Not given lightly by my kind. Must be earned through resonance harmony. Perhaps humans are not as structurally weak as we believed." As if in response, Vextul stirred in their chamber, tiny crystal appendages reaching out. Without hesitation, Elena adjusted the chamber's fields, allowing the seedling to establish resonance contact with both their guardian and her suit's energy field. Word of the incident spread quickly through known space. Within days, other Carvi vessels arrived at Europa Station, each a unique geometric wonder. They watched Elena's interactions with Kithral-en and Vextul with intense interest, their faceted eyes refracting countless questions. Some brought their own seedlings, seeking to learn about human medical techniques and child-rearing practices. A bridge had been built, not through shows of force or complex diplomacy, but through the simple act of caring for a child in need. It was a small step, but perhaps it was enough to begin changing centuries of interspecies mistrust. As Elena watched Vextul take their first wobbling steps between herself and Kithral-en weeks later, their crystal matrix chiming with joy, she realized that sometimes the strongest bonds were forged not in the heat of conflict, but in the quiet moments of healing and growth. Humanity had made its first real connection with the Carvi not through strength of arms, but through strength of heart. The incident at Europa Station would later be marked in human history as the beginning of a new era, one where humanity's role in the galaxy began to shift from explorers to protectors, trusted by even the most dangerous species to guard their most precious treasures, their young. It was a responsibility that would change the course of both human and Carvi society forever, rippling out across the stars like the harmonious chimes of crystals singing in the void. For Elena, however, it was much simpler. As she helped Vextul learn to control their matrix harmonics, their tiny crystal form glowing with accomplishment, she knew that some barriers, be they of crystal, culture, or evolution itself, could only be broken by the most powerful force in any universe, love. Echoes of trust. Dr. Marcus Okoro stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the crystalline world of Carvi's Prime grow larger in their approach. The planet was a stunning sight, a gas giant's moon whose methane oceans had been transformed into vast geometric patterns of living crystal by centuries of Carvi civilization. "Dad, come look at this." His daughter Zara's voice drew him from his contemplation. The 16-year-old prodigy was hunched over a holographic display, her dark eyes bright with excitement. The Carvi's crystal matrices, they're not just for communication. They're storing genetic memory. Marcus smiled, remembering why he'd fought so hard to bring her on this mission despite the Council's protests. Zara had an intuitive understanding of xenobiology that surpassed many seasoned scientists. More importantly, she had a way with young aliens that transcended species barriers. Ambassador Okoro, the ship's AI announced, the Carvi High Resonance Chamber requests your immediate presence upon docking. They say, it's about the seedlings. Marcus's smile faded. This was why they'd been summoned to Carvi's Prime. In the 3 years since first contact at Europa Station, a mysterious ailment had begun affecting Carvi young. Their crystal matrices were becoming unstable, failing to hold proper resonance patterns. Some feared it was a result of increased contact with other species, while others suspected deeper environmental causes. The Harmony docked with the massive crystal spire that served as the Carvi's main diplomatic hub. Marcus and Zara donned their pressure suits, designed specifically for the high-pressure methane atmosphere the Carvi preferred. They were met by Guardian Kith Ralen, one of the first Carvi to trust humans with their young. "Welcome, Resonance Friend Okoro," Kith Ralen chimed, their crystal matrix shifting through formal greeting patterns. Their faceted eyes fixed on Zara. "And this must be your seedling." The harmonics speak of her skills with young ones. "Thank you for receiving us, Guardian," Marcus replied as they were led through corridors of living crystal. "We came as soon as we heard about the matrix instabilities." The high resonance chamber was a vast dodecahedron carved from a single massive crystal, its faces reflecting and refracting the light of thousands of Carvi gathered in tiered observation platforms. At the chamber's center, a group of seedlings huddled together, their matrices flickering erratically between disturbing ultraviolet frequencies. The affliction spreads, intoned high resonator Vectal, their massive form dominating the central platform. 37 seedlings in the capital spire alone. Some claim it is punishment for treating with soft forms. Others demand we sever all contact with other species. "If I may," Zara spoke up suddenly, stepping forward. Marcus felt his heart skip. It was a breach of protocol for anyone but the designated ambassador to address the high resonator directly. But before he could stop her, she continued, "The patterns in their matrices, they're similar to what happens when crystal structures experience harmonic interference." The chamber erupted in chiming discussions. Vectal's facets shifted to a deep purple of interest. "Explain, young soft form." Zara pulled up a holographic model from her suit's computer. "Look at the baseline resonance patterns from 3 years ago, compared to now. There's a subtle background frequency that's grown stronger. It's disrupting the seedling's natural harmonics." "Impossible," chimed a Carvi scientist. "We monitor all frequencies in our crystal networks." "Not this one," Zara replied confidently. "Because it's not coming from your networks. It's coming from Carvi's Prime itself." Marcus watched with pride as his daughter explained her theory. The moon's recent orbital shift had changed its relationship with the gas giant's magnetic field. This was creating a previously undetected resonance pattern that interfered with the delicate crystal matrices of developing seedlings. "If we can develop a counter-resonance," Zara suggested, "we could protect the seedlings until their matrices are strong enough to naturally resist the interference." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Vectal spoke, their harmonics carrying the weight of authority. "The soft-form seedling shows wisdom beyond her crystal age." We would hear more of this counter-resonance theory. What followed was 3 weeks of intensive collaboration between human and Carvi scientists. Zara worked tirelessly alongside crystal engineers, helping develop specialized chambers that could shield young ones from the harmful frequencies while their matrices developed proper resistance. But it wasn't just her scientific contributions that made an impact. During breaks from the technical work, Zara spent time with the affected seedlings, teaching them human games adapted for their crystalline physiology. The sight of a human teenager and Carvi young ones creating harmonic music together did more for diplomatic relations than any official treaty. The breakthrough came on their 23rd day on Carvi's Prime. The first successful counter-resonance chamber was activated, and within hours, the seedling inside showed significant improvement in matrix stability. More chambers were quickly constructed, and soon the affliction spread was halted. "Your seedling has done our people a great service," Kithralan told Marcus as they watched Zara play a modified version of hide-and-seek with a group of recovering younglings. "She sees with both mind and heart, this one. She's taught me as much as I've taught her," Marcus replied honestly. "Sometimes it takes a child's perspective to solve an adult's problems." "Indeed," chimed Vectal, approaching silently. "Which is why the high-resonance chamber has reached a decision. We wish to establish a permanent exchange program. Young ones of both species, learning from each other, growing together. Will you help us build this bridge, Ambassador Okoro?" Marcus watched as his daughter helped a wobbly seedling practice their first independent resonance patterns, both of them chiming with delight at the success. "I think," he said slowly, "that the bridge is already being built. We just need to follow their lead." The exchange program would become one of the most successful diplomatic initiatives in human history. Young humans lived and studied on Carvi's Prime, while Carvi seedlings were welcomed into specialized education centers throughout human space. Each group learned to see beyond physical differences to the harmonies that connected all living things. Years later, when asked about the key to successful interspecies relations, Marcus would always point to a holograph from those first days, Zara surrounded by Carvi seedlings, all of them glowing with shared joy as they created music together. "The future," he would say, "belongs to those who can find harmony in difference." And in the crystal spires of Carvi's Prime, new generations of Carvi grew up knowing that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the softest touch could create the strongest bonds. The affliction that had threatened their young had led to an unprecedented era of cooperation and understanding, proving that even the greatest challenges could become opportunities for growth when faced together. As for Zara, she would go on to become one of the leading experts in xenopediatrics, pioneering new approaches to caring for the young of various predatory species. But she never forgot those first weeks on Carvi's Prime, where she learned that the language of caring transcended all barriers, even those made of living crystal. The Predators Congress. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka adjusted the environmental controls of Neptune's orbital station Concordia one final time, her movements precise despite her exhaustion. The massive station had been modified over 6 months to accommodate 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous species, the crystalline Carvi, the serpentine Nexu, and the plasma-based void-born. Each required radically different atmospheric conditions, gravity levels, and safety protocols. "Ambassador," her AI assistant Helios chimed, "the void-born delegation has entered the system. Their containment vessels are larger than expected." Yuki moved to the observation deck, watching as the void-born ship approached. Unlike conventional vessels, it was essentially a massive containment field holding together beings made of pure plasma, their forms rippling with solar fire. Her eyes widened as she saw why their containment vessels were so large. They had brought their young ones. "They weren't supposed to bring children," she muttered, quickly pulling up the station schematics. "Helios, reconfigure Deck 7 for juvenile plasma containment. And alert Dr. Patel that we'll need additional medical monitoring." "The Nexu are objecting," Helios reported. "Deck 7 is adjacent to their nesting quarters. They're concerned about the proximity of plasma-based lifeforms to their eggs." Before Yuki could respond, another alert sounded. The Carvi delegation was demanding an emergency conference. Their crystalline matrices had detected what they called dangerous resonance patterns from the void-born approach. Taking a deep breath, Yuki straightened her formal diplomatic uniform. This was exactly what she had feared, ancient instincts and rivalries threatening to destroy any chance of cooperation before it could begin. The emergency conference chamber was a technological marvel, divided into 3 distinct environmental sections. The Carvi representatives gleamed in their high-pressure methane atmosphere, while the serpentine Nexu coiled in their humid, high-gravity section. The void-born representatives pulsed within their containment fields, their voices translated from plasma fluctuations into comprehensible speech. "This is an outrage," high resonator Vectal chimed, their crystal matrix flashing warning patterns. "Bringing unstable young ones to a diplomatic summit." "Our children are not unstable," the void-born elder, a being called Stellar Heart, interrupted. Their form flared with indignation. "They are the future of our people, and they have the right to witness this historic moment." "And what of our eggs?" Nexu matriarch Sesthera hissed, her scales shifting colors rapidly. "The heat signatures from your containment fields." "Enough." Yuki's voice cut through the translations, firm but not aggressive. "Look at what's happening here. Each of you has brought your young ones, or is protecting them. Not because you wish to provoke conflict, but because they are precious to you. This is what brings us together, not what divides us." The chamber fell silent. Yuki continued, moving to stand in the center where all could see her. "Humanity has learned much from each of you. The Carvi taught us that strength can be found in crystalline harmony. The Nexus showed us the power of adaptive wisdom. The Void-born demonstrated that even the most volatile forces can be channeled for creation rather than destruction." She gestured to the observation windows, where Earth was visible as a distant blue dot. "We were once like you, predators who feared each other, who thought strength came only from dominance. But we learned, as you have begun to learn, that true power lies in protecting what we love." The tension in the chamber began to shift. Vectal's matrix settled into thoughtful patterns. Sesthera's coils relaxed slightly. Stellar Heart's plasma form pulsed with calmer frequencies. "Perhaps," Yuki suggested, "we should let the young ones show us the way. They seem to have fewer preconceptions about who should be enemies." She was right. On Deck 7, now carefully modified to safely accommodate all species, something remarkable was happening. Young Void-born, contained in personal fields, were fascinating the Carvi seedlings with their light displays. Nexu hatchlings watched from their secured areas, their natural fear overcome by curiosity as Carvi young ones created crystalline music. Over the next week, as the adults debated treaties and territories, the children formed their own bonds. A young Void-born discovered they could help incubate Nexu eggs with carefully controlled plasma emissions. Carvi seedlings learned to modify their resonance patterns to communicate with Void-born young. Nexu hatchlings demonstrated hunting techniques that the others translated into their own forms of movement. The breakthrough came during what could have been a disaster. A power fluctuation threatened to destabilize the Void-born containment fields on Deck 7. Without hesitation, the Carvi young ones formed a crystalline resonance network to help maintain the fields, while Nexu hatchlings used their bioelectric abilities to stabilize the power grid. The adults watched in amazement as their children worked together instinctively to protect each other. "Perhaps," Stellar Heart observed, their plasma form rippling thoughtfully, "we have been teaching the wrong lessons all these cycles." "The seedlings show us truth," Vectal agreed, their matrix harmonizing with the Void-born's frequencies. "Strength multiplies when shared." Sesthera's scales shifted to deep blues of contemplation. "Our ancestors hunted alone, but our children will thrive together." The Predators Congress concluded with the signing of the Concordia Accords, the first multi-species treaty focused not on territory or resources, but on the protection and nurturing of young ones. Each species would contribute their unique strengths: Carvi crystal technology to build better habitats, Nexu adaptive biology to improve medical care, Void-born energy manipulation to power it all. But the real change was cultural. Observation decks that had been designed to keep species separate were modified to allow controlled interaction. Educational programs were established to teach young ones about their different cultures. Even hunting practices, once a source of conflict, became a way to share knowledge about different methods of survival. Yuki watched from her office as a young Void-born, carefully contained, demonstrated plasma art for a group of fascinated Carvi seedlings and Nexu hatchlings. The scene was being recorded and transmitted across human space, a symbol of hope for the future. "It's remarkable," her assistant Helios commented. "These species were mortal enemies just a few years ago." "Children don't inherit hatreds," Yuki replied softly. "They have to be taught them. We just gave them the chance to learn something different." The success of the Predators Congress would echo through the decades that followed. Other predatory species, seeing the benefits of cooperation, began to reach out. The station that had once been a risky diplomatic experiment became a permanent center for interspecies youth education and cultural exchange. More importantly, it proved that the fiercest predators could become the strongest protectors when given the chance. The young ones who met on Concordia grew up to be leaders in their own rights, carrying forward the lesson that diversity was not a weakness to be feared, but a strength to be celebrated. As for Yuki, she would often visit the station's nursery level, watching young ones of different species playing together under careful supervision. In those moments, she knew that the future of the galaxy was not in treaties or technology, but in the hearts of children who never learned to see each other as enemies. Trial by storm. Captain Jean Wei stood on the bridge of the Stellar Sanctuary, watching the massive solar storm approach through the ship's quantum filters. The vessel, originally designed as a deep space research station, had been converted into an emergency rescue ship when the first warnings of the storm came. Now, its holds were filled with refugees from 3 different predatory species, all fleeing the radiation wave that threatened to destroy their outpost colonies. "Status report," she called out, keeping her voice steady despite the tension thrumming through the bridge. Her first officer, Lieutenant Diego Ramirez, responded without looking up from his console. "Environmental systems at 87% capacity. The Carvey crystal matrices are stable in Hold 2, Nexu clutches secure in Hold 3, and void-borne containment fields holding at 92% in Hold 4. But Captain..." He hesitated, "We're running out of power to maintain all these different environments." Jean understood his concern. Each species required specific conditions to survive: methane atmospheres for the Carvey, high-gravity humid environments for the Nexu, and intense magnetic containment fields for the void-borne. The Stellar Sanctuary had never been meant to support so many different life forms simultaneously. Engineering to bridge, Chief Engineer Amara Okafor's voice crackled through the calm, "Captain, we've got another problem. The storm's magnetic interference is affecting the void-borne containment fields. We need more power to compensate, but if we divert it, the Carvey environmental systems will fail," Jean finished. "How long do we have?" 3 hours, maybe 4 before we have to make a choice." The weight of command pressed down on Jin's shoulders. They had rescued these people, families, children, from their failing colonies. Now they might have to choose which ones would survive. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. "Captain," the ship's AI announced, "Guardian Kith-Ralen requests an immediate conference with representatives from all species. They say, they have a proposal." Minutes later, Jean found herself in the ship's converted conference room, separated from the various species by necessary environmental barriers. Guardian Kith-Ralen's crystal matrix pulsed with urgent harmonics, while Nexu clutch leader T.S. Vara's scales rippled with anxiety. The void-born elder, Corona Dawn, flickered within their containment field. "We have been monitoring the ship's systems," Kith-Ralen began, their translator conveying complex harmonics. "We understand the power constraints. Our young ones will not survive without the containment fields," Corona Dawn pulsed, their plasma form agitated. "Nor will our eggs last in cold methane," T.S. Vara hissed. "But perhaps there is another way." Jean watched in amazement as the 3 representatives outlined their plan. The Carvey had discovered their crystal matrices could help focus and channel the Voidborn's plasma energy. The Nexu's bioelectric fields, properly aligned, could help stabilize both systems. "It's never been attempted," Kith-Ralen admitted. "The resonance patterns could shatter our matrices. The plasma interactions could burn out Nexu nervous systems. But our children might live, Corona Dawn finished. Jean studied each of them carefully. You understand the risks? This isn't just theoretical, you're talking about physically linking your life support systems. We understand, Captain. T.S. Vara's scales shifted to deep blues of determination. We were all predators once, each believing we were strongest alone. Perhaps it's time to prove otherwise. The next hours were a blur of carefully coordinated chaos. Engineering teams worked alongside Carvey crystal shapers to modify environmental barriers. Nexu engineers, their bodies uniquely suited to handling bioelectric fields, helped rewire power distribution systems. Void-born elders taught human technicians how to safely channel plasma energy through crystal matrices. The storm hit just as they completed the final connections. The ship shuddered under the impact of the first radiation wave. Warning alarms blared as systems began to overload. Now, Jean ordered. In Hold 2, adult Carvey formed a living crystal network, their matrices humming with strain as they channeled energy. In Hold 3, Nexu adults coiled around power nodes, their scales glowing as they processed and redirected massive amounts of electricity. In Hold 4, void-born elders pulsed in careful rhythm, feeding controlled bursts of plasma energy into the crystal network. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the ship's power grid stabilized. The environmental systems steadied. The containment fields strengthened. But it was what happened next that would be remembered in stories for generations. The children, watching their parents work together, began to experiment on their own. Young Voidborn discovered they could share their energy directly with Carvey seedlings, helping stabilize their matrices. Nexu hatchlings found they could sense plasma fluctuations through their bioelectric fields, warning Voidborn young ones when they were approaching dangerous power levels. Carvey children learned to create crystalline structures that could safely channel both plasma and bioelectric energy. Captain, Diego called out, wonder in his voice, you need to see this. The ship sensors revealed something extraordinary. The combined energy systems weren't just maintaining life support, they were creating new, hybrid environments. Spaces where different species could safely interact, protected by crystalline barriers energized by plasma and stabilized by bioelectric fields. As the storm raged outside, the stellar sanctuary became a crucible of innovation. Species that had once been mortal enemies worked in shifts, taking turns maintaining the power network. They shared meals, each in their own environment, told stories, and watched their children play together across carefully maintained barriers. When the storm finally passed, 5 days later, no one had been lost. But something had been gained, a profound understanding that survival wasn't about being the strongest predator, but about learning to combine strengths. We should maintain these modifications, Corona Dawn suggested during the final conference. Our young ones, they have learned things we never thought possible. The resonance patterns are stronger together, Kithralen agreed. Like a symphony where each instrument plays its part. T.S. Vara's scales rippled with amusement. Who would have thought? Predators becoming protectors, not just of our own young, but of each other's. The Stellar Sanctuary's emergency mission became the model for a new type of ship, biological arcs designed to support multiple predatory species in crisis situations. More importantly, it proved that the fiercest hunters in the galaxy could work together when survival demanded it. Jean kept a holographic recording from those days, 3 young ones, a Carvey seedling, a Nexu hatchling, and a juvenile Voidborn, working together to create a beautiful light display using their combined abilities. It reminded her that sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from careful planning, but from necessity. The storm taught us something vital, she would later write in her report to the Interspecies Council. In space, there are no lone predators. There are only those who learn to adapt together, and those who perish alone. The Stellar Sanctuary would go on to become a legendary ship, its story taught in schools across the galaxy. But for those who lived through that storm, its greatest legacy was the lesson it taught, that true strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the willingness to protect, not just your own, but all life that shelters in your care. Symphony of the Stars. Dar. Raven Martinez stood in the grand amphitheater of Unity Station, watching as the first graduating class of the Interstellar Protection Force took their places. The scene before her would have been impossible just a decade ago, Carvey crystal shapers standing alongside Nexu hunters, void-born energy weavers pulsing in harmony with their containment fields, and humans integrated throughout, all wearing the distinctive iridescent badges of the IPF. But what made this truly remarkable was that these weren't just any graduates, these were the children who had grown up during humanity's first encounters with each species. The ones who had never learned to fear each other. Quite a sight, isn't it? A familiar voice chimed. Guardian Kithralen's crystal matrix sparkled as they approached, accompanied by their ward, now fully grown. Vextal had grown into a magnificent crystal being, their matrix patterns more complex than any Raven had ever seen. I still remember when Elena Novak first saved you both, Raven smiled. None of us could have imagined this. Individual strength creates barriers, Vextal chimed thoughtfully, their matrix harmonizing with subtle undertones. Combined strength breaks them down. The ceremony began with a display that showcased exactly what made this new force unique. A team consisting of a Carvey crystal shaper, a Nexu biomanipulator, a void-born energy weaver, and a human coordinator demonstrated an emergency response scenario. The Carvey created crystalline structures that the void-born charged with plasma energy, while the Nexu used their bioelectric fields to stabilize and direct the power. The human coordinated their efforts, their different abilities working in perfect synchronization. Commander Martinez, the station's AI announced, the Founding Council is ready for your address. Raven took her place at the podium, facing not just the graduates but the assembled dignitaries from all species. She recognized many faces, Dr. Elena Novak, now aged but still sharp as ever, Zara Okoro, who had grown from a precocious teenager into a leading xenopediatric specialist, Ambassador Yuki Tanaka, whose Predators Congress had laid the groundwork for this day, and Captain Jean Wei, whose actions during the Great Storm had proved that different species could do more than just coexist, they could thrive together. 10 years ago, Raven began, we were separated by fear, biology, and history. We saw each other as threats to be contained or rivals to be overcome. But a few brave individuals dared to ask, what if we protected each other instead? She gestured to the graduates. Look at what that question has created. The Carvey once used their crystal matrices solely for defense, now they build habitats that sustain multiple species. The Nexu feared their bioelectric abilities would harm others, now they help stabilize life support systems across the galaxy. The Void-born contained their plasma forms to avoid destroying, now they power the very ships that explore our shared cosmos. A soft harmonic resonance filled the chamber as the Carvey graduates synced their matrices in appreciation. The Nexu's scales rippled with pride colors, while the Void-born pulsed in synchronized patterns. But our greatest achievement, Raven continued, isn't in our technology or our treaties. It's in you, the first generation to grow up knowing that diversity isn't a weakness to be feared, but a strength to be celebrated. You are the living proof that the fiercest predators can become the strongest protectors. As if to emphasize her point, a young Void-born named Aurora Spark demonstrated their specialized containment field, one that could safely interact with Carvey crystal structures without damaging them. Beside them, a Nexu graduate named Swiftstrike showed how their bioelectric sense could detect distress signals from any species, while their human partner, Kai Chen, coordinated their responses through a neural interface designed by Carvey engineers. The Interstellar Protection Force isn't just another peacekeeping organization, Raven explained. It's a new way of existing in our galaxy. Each of you brings unique strengths, Carvey resilience, Nexu adaptability, Void-born power, human innovation. But together, you become something greater, a symphony of stars, each light making the others shine brighter. The graduation ceremony concluded with a tradition that had emerged from those early days of contact, the promise of protection. Each graduate stepped forward to make their vow, not just to their own species, but to all. "I promise to protect," they declared in their various languages, the translations harmonizing together. "Not because I am stronger, but because I am part of a greater strength. Not because I am fiercer, but because I have learned to care. Not because I am a predator, but because I choose to be a guardian." Later, during the celebration, Raven watched as the graduates mingled freely in their specially designed common areas. A young Carvey was teaching a human the intricacies of crystal harmonics. A Voidborn and a Nexu were demonstrating how their combined abilities could create spectacular light shows. Species that had once been mortal enemies were now graduating together, working together, growing together. "Did you ever imagine this?" Elena Novak asked, joining Raven at the observation window. "When you were treating that first injured Carvey warrior?" "Never," Elena admitted. "I was just trying to save 2 lives. I never dreamed it would lead to saving entire civilizations." "That's usually how the biggest changes start," Raven smiled. "With one person choosing to protect instead of fear." The Interstellar Protection Force would go on to become legendary throughout the galaxy. Their teams would face challenges that no single species could handle alone: cosmic storms, spatial anomalies, planetary disasters. But their greatest achievement remained the simple fact of their existence, proof that evolution's fiercest children could choose a different path. As the celebration continued, Raven received an alert about a distress signal from a distant sector. Without hesitation, graduates from all species volunteered for the rescue mission. As she watched them prepare, working together with practiced ease, she realized that they had created something unprecedented in the galaxy's history, a future where the strongest hunters had become the most dedicated guardians, and where the power to destroy had been transformed into the power to protect. The symphony of stars played on, each voice unique but harmonizing together, creating a music that would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. And in that harmony, the galaxy's greatest predators had found their true calling, not as creatures to be feared, but as protectors to be honored, guardians of a future where strength